Hey everyone, I want to talk about what it feels like to be recovered from sensorimotor OCD, what that entailed, all of my journey in between to where I am today, why it felt so hopeless, because most people do not understand sensorimotor if they haven't gone through it, like most things in OCD, but sensorimotor specifically. You can find some moderate information on contamination OCD, harm, POCD if people aren't afraid to talk about it. But sensorimotor and hyper-awareness, the information is really bleak. That's why I make as much content as I do, because it's important to talk about this from the recovered aspect and the journey aspect. So before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button down below. We actually just moved all of our 8:30 p.m. UK time Tuesday webinars to Zoom, which is great. It just runs smoother. And as they're getting larger, 50, 60, 100 plus people every time, we got to have Zoom, which is great. If you haven't been to a webinar, they are a lot of fun. People love it. We have them in our packages when people buy packages, 4, 6, 8, 10 pack, whatever you want to buy, plus individual. It's just a great value system that we have to that. They're just a lot of fun. And you get to talk to people all over the world, which is something you don't get to do every day. So most people know my story. This is not going to be a video for people who are just finding the channel. I've done 50, 60, 70 different videos on sensorimotor. My name is Nick from New Jersey, and I had really bad sensorimotor OCD, primarily swallowing and saliva, also had blinking, also had thumb hyper-awareness of my anxiety sensations, and a consciousness pattern, stomach hyper-awareness, anything to do with being fat, like the way stuff felt on my clothing, temperature hyper-awareness. Anything that I deemed difficult or tough, I would have a severe hyper-awareness of that. So give you an example, I'd be writing my name on a piece of paper, and not only would it feel like I was losing muscle from my fears of body dysmorphia, feeling as real as it can get, and no amount of reassurance will let you off the hook. But the hyper-awareness of my arm whilst writing, it wasn't as if I was writing like Nick, my name. It would be my mind inside my bicep, the way it made me feel, and all the just, oh, this is so difficult, as if feeling like I'm trekking through a desert. So I would say it took me around 3 years to accept my worst case scenario. And I was pretty dedicated to my sensorimotor. I putzed around a lot with my body dysmorphia, but a lot of the principles bled over once because I remember in the beginning I thought, I don't have any conditional self-acceptance. So that was completely delusional on my part. I had really bad conditional self-acceptance. So, and what do I mean by it took me 3 years? It took me 3 years to believe and embody this statement, okay? It's crazy how I can write recovery on a sticky note. I can accept the presence of all, keyword all, sensations. So what is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. It took me 3 years to accept that. Now, a year into my journey doing things properly, I tell people, if you're coming in to see us for the first time, people say, no, I've been working on recovery for a while. No, until you're learning the proper tools, it's very similar to showing up on a job site as a construction worker, building a plan for a 5,000 square foot home, but you've been trying to build it with a 3,700 square foot. Next day, 8,700. So you've actually never done it properly, which could be really hard for people to wrap their heads around. So in between that journey to accepting that, and that's all sensations. It's not just the blinking, breathing, swallowing, saliva, heartbeat, because I've worked with so many different people over the years, hundreds of people that say, I'm different, I have haircut OCD, hair follicle, pelvic floor, stomach hyper-awareness, organ hyper-awareness, eyelid hyper-awareness, tongue hyper-awareness, palate hyper-awareness, chewing hyper-awareness, clothing hyper-awareness. Everyone thinks they're different. The core fears are always the same, which is if I notice XYZ sensation for the remainder of my life is ruined. That's why if it tries to morph around on me, which it doesn't, but if it did, it doesn't bother me. So it could go from blinking to saliva to hyper-awareness of this for a day to sounds. Remember, I had really bad tinnitus-based fears for 4 months. Went to the hospital twice, audiologist, read every single article in the American Tinnitus Association, had a little bit of a stint for a little bit of visual snow, on and off, nothing serious, but still the fear of noticing something in my peripheral, psychological vision inside my head, and that ruining my life for the remainder of my life. So that's what fueled everything to do with this. Now, although that's the belief about this, the behavioral response to this would be, I am no longer, this is a very difficult thing because there's a lot of distraction that will come with this. I am no longer willing to avoid anything. That belief did not happen overnight from a behavioral perspective. This took a long time for me to come to terms with that. I will not avoid anything. I am no longer willing to avoid anything. So getting up in the morning, no snoozing, going back to the gym, losing a bunch of weight, engaging with my wife again. I had a lot of isolation. The room I'm sitting in right now, my printer is to the left of me. That same stand is where my monitor sat with my computer when I played video games 70, 80 hours a week plus and didn't sleep. So my whole life had to change. When I did that, when I took this belief and this philosophy of a blind faith of risk, I had extreme increases in my hyper-awareness, like we all do. So that's something else to expect. When you cut your compulsions and avoidance behaviors, there's a couple things to expect for most people. So increase in symptoms. And when I say symptoms, I mean not just your hyper-awareness, your doubt of the entire process. It's going to do everything it can to pull you back because you've been engaging in this forever. So an increase in symptoms and a full doubt in me. And that's okay. I get that. I was the same way. So increase in symptoms and a full doubt in me and everything we talk about. Because you'll look at that and you'll say, there's no way that those 8 words, I can accept the presence of all sensations, can change my life forever. But it does. And this principle has been used with everything in my life. When I'm hiking and my knees are hurting me at 14,000 feet, when I'm in a difficult conversation, having to use a lot of mental strength to keep things calm and decrease dramas. So this is not just for the major sensory motor. This will change your life forever. There's a great quote. I don't remember exactly how it goes. It says something along the lines of, most of the world's problems could be solved by being able to sit in a silent room by yourself, or sit in the room in silence, etc., or something like that. You know, the main things to remember about sensory motor when you're going through is rumination. And the rumination cycle, when it comes to sensory motor, is the automatic intrusiveness of your sensations right when you wake up. So it's so important to realize that that's primarily automatic. I'm not going to go into great depth. I can talk about this for 100 hours straight. I'm not even kidding. I've made so many hours of content on the rumination myths. Rumination is primarily not even really a compulsion. You're analyzing on top of your automatic rumination that's coming from your core fears. So your core fears at the top, that trickles down. There's an automatic fire that's always in the back of your mind. That's the intrusive breathing, pelvic floor, hairline, teeth hyper-awareness. That's automatically coming from, if I know these sensations forever, my life is ruined, and then you analyze on top of that. So rumination is primarily automatic. This is what most people get wrong. The second part is that avoidance, like I just spoke about, but it is important to cover this again. Avoidance is usually a little bit more problematic than, say, rituals for sensory motor. Not that people don't have rituals or compulsions, like outward compulsions. It's just a lot more avoidance behavior. The other thing is that, and I have to star this because there's a lot of misinformation on timelines. There's no timelines for OCD recovery. Now, what do I feel like today? I have no automatic intrusive cycle around my sensory motor whatsoever. I don't think about it at all. Do I notice my sensations? Of course I do. I'm a human being. But I'm not scared of noticing my sensations. You noticed your sensations well before your sensory motor was chronic. You play sports when you were younger. You live in a hot climate in the desert, Arizona, areas of San Diego, and you were a soccer player and your mouth was dry. You noticed your saliva you're swallowing and the roughness of your throat. The difference was there wasn't a fear pattern there. It doesn't matter if it's a disorder-based. Like I say, you trying to distinguish, is this real or not, is the compulsion. So you're going to have to accept that the number one thing, again, keeping you stuck is your belief. And the avoidance and everything, they instill that. So I have no fears of any sensations. I don't mind noticing my sensations. If they were to come back, I don't like it. So this is the biggest thing too. We have to remember this. And this goes for all fears. This isn't just a sensory motor thing. But acceptance does not equal agreement. So I don't like noticing my sensations, but I can accept that if that was to happen. Acceptance doesn't mean agreement. The other thing, it's not this. I don't give a fuck. This is probably the most important principle so far I've talked about in this video. It's not that I don't give a fuck. So if you use an example, there's a lot of people with really big platforms right now. Understandably so. I feel all the amount of sympathy for them. The ones who are always saying, I don't care what anyone thinks about me. You know, if you take a female that has lips done, nose done, like over-the-top makeup, you care what people think about you, and that's okay. Because I care what people think about me. I just don't care at the level that you care. I have a healthy care. Because if someone says to me, hey, I don't like this one particular thing about you, like maybe I have bad BO, and they're like, hey man, you have really bad BO. I care about that. This is where people go wrong. Even the title, I don't give an F, is so misleading. And it's actually quite childish if you think about it, because it's so super. So this is the most superficial way to think, and this is the most philosophical way to think. That statement is not even a millimeter below the cap, because it's just not real. You care what other people think about you, and you arguably need to if you want to be successful in anything. So if you want to find a mate, if a partner's, hey, you're very reckless with your money, you probably want to have a healthy dosage of guilt and care about that from moderated belief systems. Just saying you don't care what people think while you have all the plastic surgery, anabolic steroids, while you're screaming to people on stage in economic seminars, I don't care what anyone thinks about me. I don't care what anyone thinks about me. If you didn't care what anyone thinks about you, number one, you wouldn't have to say it. Number two, you do care, and that is okay. So I definitely care that if I was to become stuck again 100%, I just don't care nearly as much as I used to. I've accepted I have OCD, and that's how you bring down the fear of fear. And that's why there's no fear cycle at all. So I haven't had a fear cycle in 2, 3, oh gosh, a solid good 2 years of my sensory motor. That doesn't mean it hasn't tried to come back, because it was my primary theme. It would just be very difficult. Not impossible, but I'm always willing to have a relapse. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Look for that direct message fill below. Remember, again, this can be applied to the physical sensations of guilt and shame, the physical sensations of depersonalization, derealization, depression, anger, etc. So if you have any questions, please ask down below. Everyone sees that they follow the channel. I go through and do as much as I can with answering as much free content as I can, and then we go from there. Have a good one, everyone. Always a pleasure.